My name is Dr. Akinwumi Oke. I'm a leadership expert, an executive coach, and a consultant. I'm the author of Lead Disruption and the book Leadership Express, a definitive guide to leading effectively in an era of disruption, was written against the backdrop of the global disruptions that we all experienced in 2020 as a result of the COVID pandemic. The book is a collection of my ideas as I tried to make meaning of what leaders were going through and what leaders need to recognize in terms of the changes that have arrived in our world, and these changes are not going away. And as we speak in 2023, a lot of these changes have transformed the way we live, the way we work, and the way we go about our being as human beings. And so I have captured in this book some insights that could help leaders lead effectively by taking time to recognize the importance of the key elements that I've outlined in the book and using those to their advantage even as we continue in the era of disruption.
We all have those adjectives that when we see Dr. Akin, our mind tells us to. And it's those adjectives that has brought us here today. Some of us, he is hard worker. Some of us, I would tell my siblings at home, my family at home, that if this is what having a PhD looks like, I definitely want to have a PhD someday.
My opening remarks will just be to say thank you. I'm happy today that finally this book meets the world. Okay? The background to the book, and I will share that in a bit, is such that it's been an on and off. And I must recognize also some of my coach is here. This is Abu. Every time we talk about the book, she will say to me, "You've got to write it. It's got to come out." And I thank you for being there. I won't sit down without saying thank you to my family, my wife. Thank you very much for always being there, always encouraging me. It's been a while that I've wanted to write a book, especially when I finished my studies in leadership, and I had developed a theory of leadership that works in what we call dysfunctional environments. So my PhD was to look at how do leaders lead in difficult environments. Environments where there is practically little or no accountability, where nothing works. And so the point behind going into this study, we say, so how then do people lead well in difficult environments where it's almost impossible to get anything done? And I looked for leaders who have gotten results in this country, who have improved our lives a little bit. And I asked them questions about what does it take to lead well where nothing works. So I asked people who have been ministers, and they say, you have this set of civil servants who are impossible to deal with. You can't sack them, right? You can't move them around. You have just a few of them who are doing the work and they are overburdened. And so how do you get results there? So they gave me answers. COVID came in 2020 and everybody was holed up and people were not knowing what to do with themselves. And I said to myself, okay, as a leadership expert and a consultant, how then can I help leaders in this situation? So I called a few of my friends, really Maureen here, and Mr. Tuji Dowu, Dr. Shola Obabori, Dr. Obama. I called a few of them. I said, look, everybody is rolled up in their homes. How are you leading? And they said, this is difficult to. It's all right, good. So let's have a conversation every month about how leaders are leading and how they are leading well in their organizations. And so that was what gave back to Leadership Express. do leaders live through disruption? Because disruption, as of 2020, we were just entering a phase of disruption in the world. And the forces of disruption that we have are still here. And they will continue to shape the world. So if you want to know what are those forces, one, we had the pandemic, which shifted the way health services, health resilience. You start hearing words now about health. Okay, those who are in that world know. They talk about health resilience, right? Health system strengthening. All those words didn't come to our world until 2020 in the full force that will now happen. Now there are geopolitical transformations in the world that you might say is happening in Russia, but what has happened to the price of bread since they started fighting in Ukraine? Okay? At least that touched everybody, right? And then they started the one in Gaza recently, right? And on the horizon, whether we want to accept it or not, China and Taiwan is brewing somewhere. Not to talk of the coups that we have on top of us. I've left Nigeria out of all of this because there are significant transformations also happening in our country, right? On top of that, there is a change in the way we work, a significant change. And in human civilization, every time there is a change in the way human beings work, the world has shifted. And that shift will cause things to happen that ordinarily were not there before. And I'll give you an example. Historians will tell us that we used to be hunter-gatherers, right? We will go after things from place to place. Human societies were organized in clans. And then we grew up into the agrarian age where we were growing farms. The moment we started farming on a large scale, we started building cities. Right? And then as we were building cities and manufacturing increased, we started services. And then people were doing all kinds of intellectual manipulations with financing and money. And then you built the empires that we had right now, right? Now we've moved away from that into the virtual world, which is the fourth industrial revolution. How many of us now use ChatGPT? And that is what they are saying is the biggest transformation agent that's coming. And why is that going to be so? Because now we can get things done without leaving the rooms that we slept in and woke up. We can earn money on our phones, right? When I teach this, I say to people, how many of us are old enough to remember those days when bullion vans used to drive us off the road? You knew they were moving money when you saw bullion vans. When was the last time you saw a bullion van on the road? You can count. In a week, you can count the number of times you see a bullion van, right? But does that mean that money is not moving? In fact, it's moving at a speed that's faster than 4 wheels. That means the world has changed. Right? So, those disruptions that are coming require that leaders have a mindset that speaks to addressing the problems around them. And those skills that leaders need were the same ones that leaders used during the pandemic. So, as I was putting together the book, those were the key elements of the conversation. So, what would you get from the book Lead Disruption? One, it offers insights about how you as a leader can navigate the challenges of living effectively in a rapidly changing world. It also helps us to answer a few crucial questions about what are the key essentials that leaders need to lead well. It's not a lot. It just requires faithful discipline for leaders to recognize that if you practice some of these things at the level that you're in, you can get the right results consistently. And I'll tell you why this is important. Leadership is one of the positions or professions where people don't get any training. Some people read a few books on John Maxwell and they have become leaders, right? And they also call themselves leadership experts. But can you hand over your body to somebody who has read a few books about medicine, or who has watched a few YouTube videos on medical practice? Yet you hand over corporations, you hand over countries to people who have not been trained to be leaders. In the coming year, we will also be setting up a number of master classes to speak to specific themes that have come out of those conversations that I've had with leaders.
This is probably one of my favorite parts of leadership. Earlier in that chapter, I had written about self-awareness. And then I come to this point, I think on page 12. When we say self-awareness, we're talking about the leader's capacity for introspection. Ask yourself these questions. Who am I at my core as a leader? What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? How do I bring impact to my world?
Chapter 4 is titled Leading with Empathy, and it's such a critical part of leadership that I think that is where I would like to read from. And it opens with a quote by Theodore Roosevelt. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. The massive disruptions to lives and livelihoods brought about by the pandemic and leadership crises around the world were directly linked to the disconnect between leaders and the lived realities of the people.
I'll go straight to the closing. I think it's part of the closing chapter, which is bringing it all together. And the paragraph I read says, this chapter closes by affirming that clear communication trumps everything else when it comes to what it takes to be an effective leader. This is because clear communication is the vehicle for ensuring that your self-awareness makes an impact.
I think the most interesting part of the book was that at some point I turned to the book for inspiration to continue my exercise regime. So I wake up in the morning and I'm thinking, dragging myself up to want to go out and walk, which is what I do, and speaking the words of the book in my mind initially, then I started recording it as I walked. The book wasn't complete. That was when I was forming the chapters of the book. So every time I go out in the morning to do my exercise, I was actually, coming up with those portions of the book. Sometimes I'm looking at, there are gaps here. So I go back, I read it. Next morning, I then go to record the areas that I felt were missing. So I was beginning to enjoy doing that.
One of the things that I spoke about when I was on his panel were the 3 Gs, which were generative, generous, and genuine. And he's all those 3 things. And these are very, very important skills for any or attributes of any leader. He's generous with sharing what he has, what he's learned through from his PhD all the way to observing leaders and bringing people together to this panel. He was sharing freely with everybody.
The fact that technology has come to be with us has not changed those values. I used to say thieving is thieving in 1923. It's the same thing. If you steal in 2023, it will be described in the same way. If you are kind in 2023, it will be so described in 1923. If you're foolish or that there are measurements for being an idiot, you would be an idiot the same qualities would apply in 1923 as they would apply now. And so Dr. Oke has written an easy to read book, because leadership tends to look like something that is fleeting. You have to catch it from the air. But he has grounded the terminology in a book that anyone can read.
There are two things that we fail at when it comes to leadership. So there's what we call leader formation and leadership development. Leader formation is, how is this person molded into becoming whatever it is that they have become. Leadership development is what we tend to focus on, which is when the person is now already there, we try to send them on a course in Harvard. Everybody is going to Harvard Business School. One of the things that I would encourage anyone who is reading the book to look at is that first chapter, and critically ask myself and yourself, who am I as a leader? So self-awareness, self-regulation, emotional intelligence, those are the things that allow a leader to be respectful of others. I used to have a boss who said to me, it was one of our British Council bosses, he said, one of the biggest challenges with Nigeria is this lack of consideration for other people. And you see, leadership cannot thrive if you are not aware of that. So self-awareness is really at the core. So if you ask me which was my favorite, I think that was it. I spent a lot of time on it because I wanted people to get it. Which one is the toughest one? Now I can't decide, because I think they were equally tough on me, in the sense that I was trying not to pour out everything that I know about leadership into this one book and save some more for the next one. A friend of mine who read the manuscript of this book was attending a leadership program, and they had given him, so Harvard had compiled a Harvard Business Review, they call this their series, on leading during the pandemic. And he called me from Scotland and said to me, Dapo, that's my second name, right? Said, everything in your book was what's been written in Harvard Business Review. I have it in front of me. I had to pay £120 to get this. So there is nothing here that's not been around. The key question is, be reminded that it is those little things and how well we are disciplined at doing them that makes us better.
The other reason I buy a book is the cover. And I think that this cover is absolutely gorgeous. You can judge a book by its cover. It is because leadership is thought to be very cranky, old-fashioned, and for old people. This is a fresh book.
To our Leadership Express partners, your belief in the transformative potential of this book has been the bedrock of its success. Your generosity with your time, insight, and support have made this launch a reality. To each one of you who has graced us with your presence today, your participation enriches this celebration and contributes to the broader conversation on effective leadership in the face of disruption. Thank you for being an integral part of this historic occasion.